It seemed like sheet metal ductwork in our project would never end, but we have reached the grand finale. In parts 1 and 2, we covered load calcs and design, installing the return trunk and branches, and the first half of the supply trunk. In this video, we're finishing the supply trunk, montaging our way through supply branches, installing wall stack boots, and talking about all the lessons learned from this massive undertaking. If you're planning to do your own sheet metal ductwork, this is one you don't want to miss. Before we get too much further on the supply trunk, there is one supply modification that I want to make here in the bathroom, and that is switching it from this outside wall here to underneath the vanity into a toe kick return. We've been looking at this supply location for several months now since we cut it in, and it's given us the chance to really think about, do we really want that there? With it being a floor supply in the bathroom, my number one concern is water. Not necessarily from us, but if some future stupid kid of ours overflows the toilet or the shower, that is a direct path into our HVAC system for water. And of course, we can't forget we now have fire sprinklers in here, which are also a potential for water. Although that's worst case scenario. But I figured while I have the chance, it's really not that difficult to just patch that hole up, cut another one right here for the supply for this room. The toe kick supply certainly does not distribute the air as effectively, but this is a fairly small bathroom. It's 84 square feet, and the door will be open to the main living area most of the time, so I'm not really too worried about that. Another consideration we had was aesthetics. This is going to be a marble tile floor with 6-inch hexagon marble. There are tile over vents that look okay, but they really restrict airflow, and they are also kind of difficult to tile over because you're cutting hex tiles to fit a perfect concentric rectangle, if you want to call it that. So I figure we can make our lives a little bit easier on the tiling front by eliminating that. We can just tile right over it and putting it here in this toe kick return. And I'm going to be building this vanity anyway. The vanity doesn't actually have a normal toe kick like a cabinet does. It looks like a piece of furniture. It's like a sliding barn door vanity, but I think I can put sort of a false toe kick a few inches back and have this grill in that. So I'm just going to take my standard 4x10 register, I'm going to put it here, and then I'm going to have to fabricate some sort of little sheet metal elbow that turns up and out towards the front of the vanity. I'm going to figure that part out a little bit later, but I think this is going to be a worthwhile decision. The reason I put my little square here on these 2x4 blocks is to mock up the corner of the vanity and sort of how far up that toe kick is going to be. That way, as I'm rounding the corner coming into the bathroom, I don't want to be able to see the edge of that supply right there. I want to set it back in the cabinet far enough that it can't be seen. Or at least if I'm going to see it, I just want to see the false toe kick, which I can stain nicely to match the cabinet. So that change is made. I already started mocking up the new boot. And speaking of changes, while we're on the topic, here's one I also made. We boarded up this supply in the hallway. Why I put a supply in the hallway in the original plan, I don't really know. It's in the center of the building. You really don't need supplies there. But the main reason that I boarded that up was because it's so close to these new returns. We decided to do a dedicated return for both the dehumidifier and the ERV. And the only place I could put them was those two stud bays. It's right across the street from this supply, so I didn't want to risk any recirculation of air from that supply to those returns. Since it's the hallway, we really didn't need it anyway. It's really going to be conditioned from the other rooms, and this is where all our return air comes in. There's actually 4 different returns in this hallway. The very first one, ERV, dehumidifier, and this guy right here. There's also the returns in each bedroom, that guy right there, and the floor return in this bedroom/office. They just look like trash bags because I haven't put these on yet. This is a wall stack head boot is what this is called. Trust me, I did not know any of this terminology when I first started this HVAC endeavor. This is so new to me, but I need to install this in the wall for our wall grills. But they're well protected with the plastic bags now, so I'm gonna wait till the very end to put these on. Closing off that hall supply upstairs does affect our total CFM available through the supply ductwork, so I had to make up for that somewhere. I decided to expand the pantry run from a 4-inch to a 5-inch. It doesn't totally soak up all the extra CFM, but we can always just dial the fan speed back down a little bit. But I did have to compensate for that extra flow somewhere, so I opened that pantry run up a little bit. So pressing on with the supply trunk, I've got this new piece mocked up in here. This is a 12x8, reduced off of the 14x8. I've already put our little periscope up to mock up our new bathroom floor return that's in that bay right next to the toilet stack. And this guy is gonna come out a little bit further. We only have one more takeoff in this bay. Let's see if I can do a full 180 here. Oh my gosh, there it is. That's the dining room takeoff. So it'll drop down right here. Then pretty immediately after that, there's gonna be another reduction from a 12x8 to 8x8, followed by a 45-degree jog so that we can bring this supply trunk closer to the wall, because this is all gonna get softed around and built down to seal this from the rest of the garage. So I didn't want to build out this gigantic soffit that can fit 2 ducts in it the whole way down. I'm gonna slim it down a little bit so it's just holding this little 8x8 against the wall all the way down the rest of the way. I got the little 8x12 duct extension here. This is the takeoff hole for the dining room supply, and then this is what I'm talking about with the reducer and the 45. So I do need a small piece of 8x8 to fit in here and fill this gap. Then we'll go like 3, maybe 3.5 feet this way, and then have another 45 to bring this out like this so we're flat up against the wall. Well, that little connection took a lot longer than I thought it would. It's a good thing I didn't time lapse because it would have been a long one. This little rectangular filler right here probably took me 20 trial and errors to get that just right with little trims off each one, but it looks good now. I am happy with that. I'm gonna put Elena on sealing and insulating this guy and this tall one over here behind me. When combined with the one that's already up, that will be like 2/3 of the supply trunk, so we're getting there. After we get the supply trunk done, we got 7 more branches to do, and sheet metal ductwork is done. Snapping this 8-foot duct section together was absolutely painstaking. I learned my lesson the hard way to only work with 5-foot snap together duct sections after this one. Well, Miss Elena, the HVAC technician who lost her calling, has done a fantastic job sealing this guy up with all of our nice little SureTape mastic tape. We just need to cut the insulation for this now, wrap it up, get these 2 takeoffs on and fastened, and we can hang this guy up. This is ductwork section 2 out of 4. Got to go right up against that guy, and we're going to be halfway there on the supply trunk rather. That went well. Cool. All right, there's section 3 of 4 out of the trunk. We just need to get this little interconnector piece in here. It's like maybe 3 feet long between these 2 8x8 sections. I'm just gonna measure that with this in place so that we get it just right. There's a 5-inch run over there that goes over to the pantry. That was a 4-inch that got upped to a 5 to accommodate the extra flow from us shutting off the hall supply. And that needs to get cut into this little intermediate section too. Not ideal that we have a takeoff coming in between these 2 angled pieces just because the flow is going to be a little bit turbulent, but it is what it is. I can only work within my framing constraints. 23.5 drive to drive, add a 1/2 inch for the fold over. Wish the long sections were as easy as these little short guys. I got this little piece mocked up, and at a glance, it looks good, but if you look closer, there's a problem. It is running into the wall. There's something just not quite right about this angle. I spent some time trying to figure it out. I did sort of figure something out. When I hung this guy, I did not pay attention to the distance from the wall. I just sort of eyeballed it parallel with the existing duct run. And it turns out I was 1.5 inches off when it came to being parallel with the wall. So that wasn't too bad. I just kind of undid this little sway brace right here that I put in. Actually, you can see there's the original hole for that screw and there's the new place. So it was about 1.5 inches off. So I kind of swayed that to where it needed to be, which of course made this measurement wrong, and this is sticking out farther from the wall than I wanted it to, but the angle is still wrong. In theory, these two 45-degree rectangular elbows should make this a perfect parallel run. If the one is parallel, the second run should be parallel, and it's clearly not. So digging into it, I think my issue is actually when I put this little reducer and this 45-degree elbow on together, somehow the angle became just tighter than 45 degrees. And I'm really not quite sure how, but we're gonna have to compensate for it now. What I'm thinking I'll do is just add a small piece in here, both to get this thing closer to the wall again, and then also put a little bit of an angle on the slides and drives to straighten this guy out in the long run. I measured that's 4 inches. It comes towards the wall in 8 feet, which my construction calculator tells me is 2.4 degrees. So if I can put like a 2.5 degree angle or something on a little short piece, maybe 6 inches long or something, I think I can straighten this thing out, but this is just one of those little minute problems that seem to arise everywhere. Doing some quick math, a 2-degree angle across an 8-inch span is only about 3/8 of an inch difference between the two sides. And I measured up there and kind of confirmed that the drive on one side needs to be about 3/8 inches closer than the drive on the other side to make up for that angle difference. So this shouldn't be too terrible. We'll see how it works out. I got it installed and I'm a little bit shocked, but I think it actually worked. The drives are just kind of started in loose fit right now, but it is looking pretty solid, right at about 3 inches from the wall all the way down, and the duct is no longer threatening to hit the wall as we approach the end of it. And if you didn't know any better, it looks like it belongs there. Now we can start mocking up our little periscope guys here on the top of the duct. There's 2 in this run. There's this 6-inch over here, and then the 5-inch that comes off the angle piece. Hopefully my little transition piece doesn't interfere with that, but we'll figure that out. Cut those out, seal and insulate this one, and then it's ready to hang. That'll be 3/4 of the supply trunk done, and then we just got to do a little bit more of this 8x8 coming off the end of here, probably about 5.5 more feet till we get to that guy up there. That's a 6-inch run right by the entry door, and then there is 2 more in these 2 open bays here that go to the living room. There's going to be another reducer after this 6-inch guy down to a 6x8 from an 8x8, and then hit those 2 6-inch runs there. It is no secret why ductwork costs so much. We got this job quoted at like between $15,000 and $20,000. That did include a basic heat pump, so there was probably $4,000 to $5,000 in equipment costs there. But roughly $10,000 for materials and labor to do this ductwork. I think when I'm said and done, I'll be in it, maybe $4,000 to $5,000 in materials alone for just the ductwork stuff, the insulation, all the tape, fasteners, the ductwork itself. And there is a lot of labor associated with this, so I am not surprised at all at that labor price. Actually, I think that was probably pretty reasonable when it comes down to it, but we just didn't really want to spend it, and I thought this would be kind of neat to do ourselves, especially when we can take the time to do the attention to detail kind of stuff like sealing every single joint and being really, really careful about how it looks, how it's sealed, and how well it's insulated. I think if I would have specified all those details up front to these contractors that bid it out, the labor price would have been even higher. Some of those quotes were using fiberglass duct board for the trunk and using some flex for the branches, which cuts down on the time and the labor and therefore the cost. So if I were to spec all sheet metal, all fully sealed, all insulated, it definitely would have been a little bit higher if I would have hired this out. So I'm glad that we are doing this labor ourselves. It's a lot, but we're almost there. I temporarily strapped this guy up in order to be able to mock up the next piece, which I lucked out is just a regular 5-foot long piece, did not have to cut or anything. I wanted to see where that takeoff was relative to the end, and I have just enough room without adding any extensions. For the very last section, I got to reduce down to 6x8 from 8x8, so that's a 2-inch reducer. The 2-inch reducer takes up about 6 inches of length of the ductwork. I have 54 inches to the wall, so I know that with my reducer and my last section of 6x8, got to make it 54 inches long, and then that should be the very last bit of trunk. The local supplier didn't even carry 6x8 snap lock duct, so I actually had this piece made when I had my main box and my 16x16 riser custom made at a local sheet metal shop. They just put this piece of duct together for me. They also made me this nice little end cap, the 6x8 end cap to go on it, and I'm going to just cut this baby to length and install it. I'll have to use a jigsaw or something similar because this is 26 gauge, it's pretty heavy duty, and it's really hard to cut through the snap lock seams because it's like 3 or 4 layers thick right at the corners. I'm not mad that this is my last reducer to put on. These things are just a huge pain, especially when the duct is not already assembled. And once it is assembled, that makes it even harder because you got the snap lock seams in the way. The nice part about this duct in particular, since it was done in the sheet metal shop, there's only one snap lock seam down here, so I don't have to mess with that when I'm doing this reducer. But in the prefabricated stuff that you snap together, there's one at each corner, so you can't avoid it. These are only second in pain to snapping together that 8-foot long duct. That is just dang near impossible. I think it took me like 30 minutes yesterday to snap that big one together. That one didn't go too bad. That was probably the easiest reducer I've had yet to do. Right at about 8-inch. All right, that's not too bad. With that last section mocked up, the whole supply trunk is finally temporarily fastened. I was able to mark where all of the takeoff locations are gonna go. Now we take it down, cut some holes in it, clean it, seal it, insulate it, put the takeoffs on, and put it all back up. And then finally the supply trunk will be up permanently and we can finish all of our branches. I think this calls for a montage. And there she is, completely hung, sealed, and insulated. This thing turned out really well. All the takeoffs are ready for their respective branches. I really like how this looked. And I was able to tuck it tight up against the wall, about 3 inches from the wall. Here's a better look at my angle brackets that I use to just help support. Just a standard 1 5/8" wood screw holding them to the wall. And it's just a bent piece of drive cleat or S-cleat. I bought those in like 8-foot sections just in case I needed them, and they were a great use for hanging all the ductwork. And at the end here, I did put another little sway brace, just bridge 2 studs with a piece of S-cleat, and then I could put a little L-shaped bracket on the bottom of this hanger. These 2 braces at the very end are U-brackets, U-shaped brackets that go up and around the back side of the duct. It was only 6 inches wide, so I wanted to retain it a little bit better here at the very end. And it's super solid with just that little bracket on there. I'm pretty shocked. Now to start on all of the branches. My ductwork assistant here has started with the sealing and taping of all these guys. That one's nice and sealed up. Look at her, she's going above and beyond. Sealing the joints of the elbow with mastic tape. Incredible. This is gonna be one airtight duct system. And everything gets wrapped with double bubble. And our soffit's gonna be insulated with rock wool as well. So we're gonna be triple insulated on this ductwork system. It's gonna be very energy efficient, hopefully.
An overkill.
Probably slightly overkill, but that's how we operate here at Mason-Dixon Acres, isn't it?
That's how any engineer operates.
Yep, that's what engineers do. It's just by nature. We have seen enough of the ductwork. We've seen enough of the branch ductwork content. I'm gonna montage through the supply runs too. We just need to crank these out. We got like 7.5 yet to do. I think there was 9 total. So with that, cue music montage number 2. And just like that, our supply trunk and all of its branches are done. Sealed, insulated, clean. All the registers are capped off. I am really happy with how this all turned out. I think we're pretty much done and over HVAC. This was a heck of a lot of work. I'm glad we did it ourselves because our anal personalities could show through in getting every seam sealed and every joint taped. And we probably could not have found any contractor that would have done that, at least for any price that we could afford. So overall, it was a worthwhile endeavor. It took us a long time. I want to say if we added up like every hour of all the days that we worked on this, it probably was 3 to 4 weeks total if we were working like 8 hours a day, where a contractor probably could have done this whole thing in less than a week with a team of just probably 2 guys. So bear in mind, it did take a long time to do this, but it's one of those things that once it gets buried behind the sheetrock, it will never be touched again, likely, for the rest of this house's life. So it was worth it to us to put the time in up front and the effort to get it as good as we possibly could. That said, there are a couple compromises that were made really just due to framing and the layout of the house. Right at the end of the supply trunk, there are these 3 takeoffs pretty closely spaced to one another. I did put the extra 2 foot on the end. That's sort of best practice to make sure that these end takeoffs don't steal all the flow. But if these were a little bit more spread out, that would have probably been better, as well as if they were a little bit further from this reducing transition. That would also help to balance the flow a little bit more. Same deal here. I would have liked if this takeoff did not come in the middle of this angle transition. It's not the worst thing in the world, but again, there's going to be some turbulent flow in there and it's not ideal to have that 5-inch takeoff there. Speaking of balanced flow, I touched on this earlier, but I did not use damper takeoffs at the trunk, which is really the best case scenario for balancing. I did use them on the 2 supplies that were accessible in the utility room, but on all these down the line that are gonna have a wooden and drywall soffit built around them, I was not gonna be able to access them. I did have a sort of harebrained idea that I would like have a damper balancer on here and stick a shaft out somehow, extend that through the drywall. That way I could adjust them after the fact, but I couldn't think of a great way to really execute that and I didn't really want to mess with it. So I'm going to have to do any balancing at the registers, or if I'm getting too crazy flow out of one register, to stick a restrictor down into the branch or something like that. I still need to do this dehumidifier supply connection with the backdraft damper. I'm going to cover that in the dehumidifier video. One of the last bits of ductwork we have to handle are the wall stack boots. This is what transitions the oval pipe coming up through the stud cavities to a grill in the side of the wall. I have 6 of these guys total. 5 are these 6 by 14 by 8-inch ovals. Of those 5, 3 are for the main air handler, 1 is for the dehumidifier, 1 is for the ERV, and then I have 1 smaller one. It's for a 5-inch oval. I can't remember the rectangular size, but that is for our supply in the pantry. We decided to make that a wall stack head. There was no great place to put it on the floor. I've already done this one and the one in the bedroom to get my bearings on what the heck I'm doing. It's certainly a lot easier than working up in the ceiling on the regular ductwork. So let's get it done. This is the last bit of sheet metal work we got to do. These are the 2 oval pipes for the dehumidifier and the ERV. I'm going to be sharing a grill for this. It's going to span both of these stud bays, but it will have 2 separate ducts for each of the pieces of equipment. Here's what the stack boot looks like up close. 8-inch oval coming into a 6 by 14 rectangle, and there are these little flanges that flap out and gives you a 1/2-inch reveal so that the drywall comes out flush with the edge of this boot, and you use these little holes to nail it to the stud. This is return air, so air is going to be flowing into it like this. Therefore, I want to crimp this boot into the oval so the crimp is in the same direction as the airflow and keeps things smooth. I'm going to set these all at 12 inches above the subfloor so they're nice and even all the way down the hallway. There's 4 going down this hallway, so I'd like them to look somewhat like they were planned at the right height. This is just sitting on top of the oval pipe now, which of course I've covered with a plastic bag to keep insulation, dust, and crap out of there. So it looks like I need to take about 2 inches off this before I crimp it. That way I can get it to the right height, same as this guy. Not exact science, but this is how I found the most consistent way to take off. In this case, I did decide a little bit less than 2 inches. I'm gonna go 1 inch to start, figuring on about 1.25 inches of engagement depth. I found the way for the most like factory looking crimp is to do a bunch of really deep ones, like 1 inch apart, and then come back and do some kind of like little shallow guys in between this. If you do deep all the way around, it really crimps the thing in, like to the point where it might even be restricting some airflow because it's less than an 8-inch oval. But I found this is kind of a good medium.
They do make these little zip tools that you put on a drill that makes like a factory crimp. Thought about getting one of those, but they're kind of expensive. So for a first time duct installer, I felt it probably wasn't worth it. So I'm gonna go ahead and throw some screws in this thing. I'm putting them kind of like right at the round over here because this is like fully taking up all the wall space. So I don't want to put another screw in like right here that will hit the drywall. In fact, I might even need to push this a little bit to adjust it. That was an issue when we stuck this up here originally. It was not straight in the wall, and this is 3.5 wide. This is 3.5 wide. So if it's leaning at all, that's a problem. Easy to check, just throw this up against it. Yeah, this is protruding a little bit. I might have to adjust this. Unfortunately, Elena went through and already sealed them all with fire caulk. This stuff dries like hard as a rock. I actually really don't like it because it just kind of chips off and flakes off. As the house moves in the seasons, I'm sure it's gonna crack and let air through anyway, so I don't even get the point. I prefer big stretch. I had done the majority of the openings in the floor and ceiling plates with big stretch. It's perfectly allowable within the IRC and our local codes. But people on social media were giving us hell about not using fire caulk, so Elena was kind of concerned and she went out and bought some on her own and went ahead and sealed anything I hadn't done already with the fire caulk, and it's like cracking and chipping off now. It's really not a very quality product in my opinion, but it is what it is. Anyway, I think I gotta nudge this in just a little bit so that at least once the drywall gets on it, it can press it all flush. These are just little trim nails left over from some exterior work. Nice and low profile, shouldn't get in the way. Trim that back because we got one coming right up next to it. All right, to get this thing to work, I did have to put a fastener in this one side here just to keep these two from separating. That'll be able to get pushed in though when the drywall gets on there. It's pretty light force. I don't think it's gonna cause any issue with the drywall. Just not ideal, that's all. All right, we gotta seal up with this tape, the old trusty SureTape SF686. It's my go-to mastic foil tape. This guy looks good. Just gotta plug this hole with the trash bag, rinse and repeat for this one. That was easy. Unfortunately though, this one at the end of the hallway is not going to be as easy. Here's why. There's a double eye joist running over here, so I could not center this in the stud bay when I drilled these holes, and I did not think that was gonna be an issue until I got the actual wall stack boot. When I set this in here, we have a problem. This does not line up with this because this pipe is centered and it just barely fits in a 14.5-inch stud bay. And this guy is not even close to centered. So I'll have to get a little bit creative with this. I think I'm going to take out this portion of this stud, move this box over. Another great lesson of why having a little bit of extra service loop on each one of your outlets is good, because you never know when stuff is gonna come up. I'll unstaple this wire, move all this over, and then sister another stud onto here. That way we have the clearance needed for this guy. It's just an interior partition wall. It's not gonna hurt anything. Just gonna be a little bit of a pain in the butt.
After installing all the wall stacks, I put some large nail plates on the sill plate to prevent any drywall screws from finding their way into the oval pipe. That's a wrap on all the ductwork. The next steps are going to be to build that HVAC soffit down, insulate it, and seal it with Siga Mirex before our drywall stage. And then finally, we'll pretty much be ready to start up after we're drywalled and have primer and paint on. We'll keep all the register covers on before that to make sure no dust gets in the system. And even after that, we'll probably put some sort of temporary filters on the register covers. But once we start that unit up, I'll be able to fine tune it a little bit more. I've been doing some online learning to figure out what I need to know for starting this up correctly, measuring all the pressures, adjusting the fan speed correctly, and making sure that we will have a tuned HVAC system that keeps the space comfortable. That's really the main goal, is just have the system perform optimally and be as energy efficient as possible. Eventually, I'll put together a spreadsheet of all the materials for this project, where I got everything, how much they all cost. I don't have that ready yet. It probably won't be ready for several months after publishing this video, but we'll eventually have that on our website. Check out the pinned comment and description for a link to that. I hope this video helped you and your future ductwork endeavors. Thanks for watching, and we will see you on the next one.